So, what exactly is subnetting or supernetting? It is actually the process of changing the subnet mask so that we can obtain a different subnet mask in order to calculate the classless addresses. Unlike its classful version, which means all networks must have or use either 256 or 65,536 or 16 million addresses. This is really a waste of IP addresses if we cannot use that many. By using classless addresses, we can adjust the value so that we obtain the closest IP address for which that we need. And this is actually a great way to conserve IP addresses. So let's first look at subnetting. And again, this is part of the process of creating classless addresses. But how does it adjust the subnet mask? The answer lies within its name, subnetting. Because we're doing subnetting instead of supernetting, we're reducing the network size, or in other words, the number of hosts that we can use in a network. Now, by default, we use 16 million, like I previously mentioned, for Class A address, and 65,000 address for Class B address, and 256 address for Class C addresses. So subnetting is the reduction of the amount of hosts by making the subnet mask bigger. On the other hand, supernetting is the increase of the amount of address you can use in a network by decreasing its subnet mask. So, like again, we have /8 for Class A, /16 for Class B, and /24 for Class C. By reducing the subnet mask, or by making the CIDR value getting bigger and bigger, or by making the CIDR value smaller and smaller, we get more host addresses. So for example, if we have a Class C address, let's say 192.168.0.0/24, we can generate more host address for this network by making this value smaller, like for example to 16. If we reduce that to 16, we would have 65,000 IP addresses, and that's like 64,000 more than we currently have. So supernetting is the increase in network address, whereas subnetting is the decrease in the host address by increasing the subnet mask. So supernetting is the increase in host address that we can use by decreasing the subnet mask. On the other hand, subnetting is the decrease of the amount of host address we can use by increasing the subnet mask. But remember that both of these are done relative to the original or default subnet mask. Now, in the previous lesson, we have discussed that a contiguous subnet mask has a continuous number of ones followed by a continuous number of zeros, and they can be expressed either in dotted decimal or CIDR format, with CIDR being more efficient. IPv4 address performing logical AND and logical OR operation with its subnet mask can be used to obtain its network address, its network and broadcast address. So in this lesson, we'll also use these techniques to find out about the range of usable host addresses. Even though I have talked about this in the last lesson, I will restate it here just to prevent some confusions. That if we have a certain amount of addresses usable for a network, we have to reduce it by 2 because the first address is always used as the network address, whereas the last address is always used as a broadcast address. So the amount of usable host addresses is always the total number of addresses minus by 2. And so here's some tips when you are doing subnetting or supernetting. When we are increasing the number of IP addresses or doubling the number of IP addresses, we decrease the CIDR by 1. So remember, since we're doubling, we're doing supernetting, and we're talking about supernetting here. And so if we're quadrupling the original number of IP addresses, we can decrease the CIDR by a corresponding value of 2, and so on. So why is it this way? Because we're talking about binaries. Binaries are really powers of 2. So we're always talking about 2 times, 4 times, 8 times, 16 times, 32 times, and so on, because they're all powers of 2. Let's look at some tips when you are doing subnetting. Whenever you are halving the number of original IP addresses, we are increasing the CIDR by 1. And if we're quartering the number of IP addresses, we're increasing the CIDR by 2. And so if you want to reduce it into half, into 1/4 or 1/8, you have to increase the CIDR by 1, 2, or 3. This is a little bit confusing, but I really want you to remember that when you're increasing IP addresses, you have to decrease the CIDR value or decrease the amount of continuous ones. And whereas on the other hand, if you are making IP addresses to become less and less or subnetting, we have to increase the number of continuous ones or increase the CIDR value.